Welcome to our series, The Battle for Public Education in the 21st Century. I'm Ken Yale, education correspondent for Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio.
Yeah, feel this from the bottom of my heart, y'all. Truly inspired. Here we go, come on, look, yo, just teaching to the test, forced by the feds, or they losing that check. Too many children left behind by this corporate assembly line. How they privatize education is a human right, and their kids gonna be fine. They send them to private schools, while ours get sent to prison or given a job serving fast food.
Today's program is entitled Connections. Organizations, networks, and movements for social justice education are blossoming throughout the country. Today we'll connect with four of them: Facing History and Ourselves, Teachers for Social Justice, the Chicago Teachers Union, and the Education for Liberation Network. We begin with an international organization that provides support for authentic and empowering history curriculum. Milton Reynolds is a senior program associate with Facing History and Ourselves. His background includes 10 years as a middle school teacher, 25 years of counseling, and a wealth of experience facilitating dialogues about racism and social justice. We join Milton Reynolds now for more about Facing History and Ourselves.
It's an organization that's grown considerably over nearly 40 years. We've got offices in 7 states and in 3 other countries. We're interested in providing quality professional development for teachers and strong curricular resources in the service of creating student-centered classrooms in which students can engage around issues of prejudice, anti-Semitism, racism, for the purpose of creating a more humane and informed citizenry. So it's really moving into the hard history and asking different kinds of questions about human behavior in relationship to history rather than assuming history is a series of preordained events. It's these case studies of difficult moments in human history that become the grist for the mill for the discussions that students and teachers have together. One of the case studies that I use a great deal, it's called Race and Membership in American History, the eugenics movement. So it's an opportunity to look at the scientific reification of race and the impact of that ideological movement in terms of consequences for marriage restriction, immigration policy, the history of sterilization in this country, but also its impact on education.
Didn't eugenics have a direct connection to some of the original testing that was done in this country and IQ tests and those kinds of things?
Yeah, there's a long relationship. When we look at the impact of eugenics on our education system, I think at the core of it, there's some fundamental assumptions about the nature of intellect that undergird the system. Those would be that intellect is fixed and ascribed along the lines of race, class, and gender. So in many respects, we have a system that was not just predicated on those ideas, but really deeply invested in those ideas. And so for me, it becomes a way of understanding some of the policies and practices, one of which is standardized testing.
Are there any schools or programs you think are really exemplary?
One of the things that we've got going on here locally through Facing History is something called the Innovative Schools Network. We pulled together 7 different schools from across the Bay Area and identified those schools and teachers who are willing to make a deeper investment into some of Facing History's work. And I think for me, it's really a blend of pedagogical practices that are student-centered and content that's relevant and meaningful, and allowing teachers to create curricular journeys for their students that tap into what's relevant and meaningful for them. What's been most exciting is I think that in the context of this Innovative Schools Network, we've been able to do what the charter school movement was supposed to do, which was to innovate and then create mechanisms for distributing best practices. If all things go as according to plan, 3 years from now, we'd like to do a statewide summit, bringing together students and teachers, along with academics and activists, really talking about what does it mean to be a change agent in this particular moment in American history. So I think this idea of teachers as learners, teachers who receive high-quality professional development, teachers who see schools as hubs for community, not simply for their students, but in many cases for their parents and other community members. Those are practices, I think, that are promising.
If any of our listeners are at schools that were interested in participating in that kind of collaboration with you, what would it mean for them to get involved?
It really is about making a deeper investment in Facing History pedagogy and content. One of the exciting things is that in all of our offices, so we've got Denver, San Francisco, LA, Cleveland, Chicago, Memphis, New York, Boston, all of these regions have these Innovative Schools networks. And so typically every other year we get together on a national level. And so the kind of synergy that you see when teachers who are excited about their practice get together and share with each other, it's phenomenal. It's what we would like to see happening in all education.
Now we'll connect with another network called Teachers for Social Justice. Jeremiah Jeffries is a leader in the organization. He's also a veteran first-grade teacher at Reading Elementary School in San Francisco, as well as an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco. We join Jeremiah Jeffries as he describes what social justice education means to him and to Teachers for Social Justice.
A lot of people, when they talk about social justice education, they focus primarily on content. And content's important, but social justice teaching is in everything. It's the way we bring families in. It's the way we communicate to students. It's the way young people communicate between each other. It's a whole atmosphere and environment and culture around schools. And what that looks like is in those spaces, primarily you would hear students speaking most of the time, and teachers sort of in the role of facilitator, really drawing out knowledge from young people, but also sharing experiences, giving students opportunities to say what they think, what they feel, and helping them build a critical analysis around that. What permeates all of our work is sort of a sense of love, collectivism, and a strong analysis. And so that's what social justice education is as well. And you're building critical minds, but also connection, right? You want students to be able to critically think about their context, about what's in front of them, about their past, their future, their present, and also at the same time be connected to each other, be connected to their community, be connected to their families.
Tell us more about Teachers for Social Justice.
Teachers for Social Justice has been around for about 14 years now. We consider ourselves a grassroots professional development organization. And what that means is that we look to create experiences for educators and sometimes the public to deepen their analysis, deepen their connection to each other, and also give them ways on how to engage young people to create empowering learning environments. And what I mean by empowering learning environments are spaces where young people want to come to. They feel like they are heard and they feel like they're able to grow, and that there's things for them there that'll be a benefit to them, that are relevant to them as well. We had about 250, 300 people attend the first conference. And then every year we grew a little bit more, until now, Teach for Social Justice, generally our registration has exceeded 1,800, at least for the last 3 years, from all over California and the United States. Our conference is free. We're all volunteer-based. No one's paid to do any of the work. We all do this in addition to working as classroom teachers, community-based educators. The other thing is we really broadened our definition of educator. So it included people who were working in after-school programs, people who were community-based educators doing health education, doing preschool, doing adult education. So we really defined the term educator very broadly because the sense that we're all in it together. Like that this is all of our community, this is all of our society. And so we all have a responsibility for helping to shape it and grow it.
What do you know about the work of other social justice educators and organizations around the country?
One of the things we noticed at our conference every year was that we were having these different activist groups and organizers come to our conference. We formed this group called TAG, which stands for Teacher Activist Groups. And we made connections with other cities. And so now there's about 12 cities. We do a conference call every month, and we share about what's going on in public education all around the country. And we sometimes have campaigns. So when the whole drama around Agenda 6 was going on, we shared curriculum. And with the current attacks on ethnic studies, we did a No History is Illegal campaign where we shared curriculum across the country. We had everyone doing ethnic studies with their students, teaching Chicano studies as it was being outlawed in Arizona, where having pride in who you are was basically made illegal. We created an 8-point platform that was a response to the corporate agenda in schools. So school closures, testing, and it incorporated all those values that we believe the community and families really hold and want for their children. There's so much good work, and people are in strong resistance all over the country. Milwaukee, Seattle, Atlanta, Philadelphia. There's a lot going on in education. People are fighting to just keep their bargaining rights. And as strong as the attacks are, and as coordinated and as well-financed as the corporate movement is, the progressive and grassroots movement, we believe and we're committed. Our commitment will far outlast theirs. When the profit is no longer there for them, we will still be there to do the work. People have really grabbed on to that and have really stepped up to do work for their communities, for their students, for their families, and it's happening all over the country.
Next, we turn to the Chicago Teachers Union. It's the third largest local in the country, representing 25,000 Chicago public school educators in a district that serves about 400,000 students. In 2012, the Chicago Teachers Union went on strike, mobilizing a massive citywide coalition against the corporate education policies of Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. The strike gained national support and was seen by many as an inspiring model of social justice unionism. Here's Jesse Sharkey, Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union.
We have worked very hard to build a coalition with parents, students, members of the community. Education is a social justice issue, and saying that the union needs to be a leader in that regard and not just focus narrowly on the sort of business contractual relations, but to see education as a social movement.
What role did Arne Duncan play in Chicago schools before he became Obama's Secretary of Education?
Arne Duncan was the CEO of the public schools in Chicago starting in '02. He implemented a very corporate model of education in the city where you make competitions between schools based on how well they could do on standardized assessments to decide which schools would remain open and which schools would be closed. By the time Arne Duncan was done with it, we had 300-some schools in probation. Schools in the neighborhoods where kids' parents didn't have jobs, didn't have stable places to live. Those, of course, turned out to be the neighborhoods where the test scores were the weakest. Rather than having real supports and helping those schools become stable in places that could thrive, Arne Duncan began a program where those schools were closed. With that, many of the skilled veteran educators that had kept the schools going for years were fired. We lost more than half of our black teachers.
Wow.
And what they've done is they've closed schools as they've replaced them with privately operated charter schools, many of whom in Chicago are politically connected. And so there are now 130 separate charter campuses operating across the city. Of course, those schools have not been performing better than the public schools which they replaced. That was the legacy of Arne Duncan.
And these corporate education policies intensified under Rahm Emanuel. He was formerly an investment banker and then Obama's chief of staff before he became Chicago's mayor.
Rahm has also gone around claiming credit for Race to the Top, which is the Obama administration's education plan, which, I call cash prizes for union busting. It starves school districts of funds except if they're willing to allow for charter expansion, over-testing, the same kind of marketplace-driven competitive strategies that I would say were so harmful in Chicago. They've now taken it on a national scale.
What were some of the ways that you were able to organize and mobilize not only teachers, but also parents and students and community members?
We didn't try to take the social issues around schooling and treat them like isolated issues that didn't come into the contract. The board announced that it was going to close about 20 schools. This was sort of in preparation for the huge school closings a couple of years later. There were marches, there were demonstrations, there was even a school occupation where people refused to leave a school on the eve of the board's vote. The point of that was to show the common cause with parents, particularly in Black and Latino communities in the city, who are really being targeted by these school closings, and that we would make a stand to say that really we want investment in our schools. We said their closing policy was racist. We said that we would fight it. And even though we lost that closing vote, I think we began to make a point and began to win some respect in a lot of the communities in the city of Chicago who actually send their kids to public school. So what it meant is that when we went into the fall of 2012 and we wound up not being able to get an agreement and have to go on strike, there were very deep reserves of public support for what we had to say and the kind of issues that we were complaining about.
What was the outcome of the strike?
The strike did not reverse corporate school reform. We managed to stop them from removing the class size language in our contract. We stopped them from getting 50% of the teacher's evaluation based on test score. And then there's some things we couldn't stop. We couldn't stop the 7-hour school day. We got the board to promise to do a bunch of hiring, so that they hired 700 new teachers to help with that new longer day. And then in subsequent years, with budget shortfalls, they fired a lot of those teachers. They laid them off.
Let's break for a minute for a little more of our theme song, Chicago Teacher by Rebel Diaz. Then we'll return to Jesse Sharkey, Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union.
Homie, I was taught by a Chicago teacher, Chicago teacher, Chicago teacher. I learned to read and write from a Chicago teacher, so I'm inspired by the fight from our Chicago teachers. The unions are uprising, taking to the streets. The workers are united, so the mayors got beef. Rhymes a fake pretender with a corporate agenda, neoliberal offender. Of course you offend us. This ain't about money, that's far from the truth. They want better work conditions to teach the youth. Politicians, I don't trust them, it's all in the name. The president, the mayor, all want political gain. They'd rather put the kids in jail, shackle them with chains, than provide an education that challenges the brain. Top-down education, Chicago the birthplace. Now it's spreading nationwide all over the place. They don't teach us how to think, they teach us how to test. They teach us how to work to put money in their checks. The CEOs need to get up out the classroom before these streets get hot.
Now, while you may not have won everything that you wanted to, a lot of activists around the country were inspired by what they saw as the emergence of a mass social justice unionism at that time.
The outpouring of support, whether it was in the form of letters or checks, the union got a couple $100,000 of donations during the course of that strike, was really quite inspiring. It reminded me that people care a lot about their schools, that the movement towards corporate school reform is not a popular one, especially not among the people who see it most up close. What we've seen in Chicago is that when we take the time to build alliances, that our ideas are popular and that we can win political fights.
How would you summarize the main lessons of the strike for those of us who support educational equity and social justice?
That unions are important, but they have to make common cause with parents and their communities. That we have to fight for our ideas and what we believe in, and that when we fight, we can win.
What has been happening in Chicago since the strike?
Since the strike, the schools really have maintained a course that they had adopted when the mayor came in, which is that there's continued to be a lot of aggressive privatization. There's been a real aggressive approach to cost-cutting, round after round of layoffs. I think we've laid off something like 3,500 school staff since the mayor has been in. We're seeing principals, in many cases, target veteran teachers because veteran teachers are more expensive to hire. We've seen a real lack of willingness to address any of the revenue needs of the schools at a city level. It's just come out, for example, that the Board of Education made $400 million worth of bad derivatives trades and investments. The banks got a huge windfall profit to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the same time that you had bankers pocketing these tens of millions of dollars, you had those same bankers on boards telling the people of Chicago that we had to close 50 schools because the board didn't have enough money to be able to keep them open.
Wow. Wow.
You can imagine.
That is unbelievable.
I mean, it's so bold. It's crazy. You know, it's the kind of thing that you almost can't believe how brazen and shocking it is. You're talking about a mayor who brags about how powerful and effective he is and how he gets things done and how tough he is. In Chicago, the financial district is called LaSalle Street, and the traders on LaSalle Street pay less taxes on the transactions that you or I would pay if we went and got a cheeseburger at McDonald's. And yet that's allowed to just continue on. You know, no, we can't tax them, but I guess we can lay off thousands and thousands of people out of our school systems. Part of what social justice unionism is about on some basic level, as far as I'm concerned, is to understand that people who care, who are in a community, who are involved in movements to fight for better conditions in their own part of the world, really are a very important resource. And we have to try to make common cause with those movements. The union brought a bus to Ferguson, and that's been something that we think is part of what it means to be responsive to the needs of others. There's 20,000 homeless students in the city of Chicago who go to school. We need to pay attention to what's going on there. That's an important voice. People who are in the unions need to try to form contacts and make common cause with people who are outside the unions. And people who are outside the unions need to do the same thing inside the education movement. And if people in the union don't seem to want to pay attention, try to find other educators who do. I promise they're out there.
Let's leave Chicago now and turn our attention to Oakland, the site of an upcoming national conference being convened by the Education for Liberation Network. Listeners from around the country are invited to attend the Free Minds, Free People Conference on July 9th to 12th. Here's more from Dr. Patrick Kamanyan, one of the organizers of the conference and an associate professor in the Teacher Education Department at the University of San Francisco.
July of 2015, the Free Minds, Free People National Biannual Conference will be making its way to Oakland. It started in 2006 in Chicago. It's a conference that is advancing education for liberation that is led by many educators, community-based educators, classroom teachers of color. So it's really looking to advance this national conversation among educators across different cities to talk about what an education for liberation looks like in different contexts so that we can inform each other's work locally.
Let's leave it there for today. We heard from just a few of the many dynamic organizations and networks within the rapidly growing movement for social justice education. No matter where you live, you can make a connection. For more information on the Free Minds, Free People Conference, go to fmfp.org. I'll be there on July 9th to 12th, and I'll hope to see you there. Next week is the final episode of our series. Please join us for an inspiring look at the future of public education. Many thanks to today's guests for sharing their deep insights and wisdom. Check out the Flashpoints website at flashpoints.net to hear all the programs and the full interviews used to make them. For Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio, I'm Ken Yale. The executive producer of Flashpoints is Dennis Bernstein. Technical director is Mike Biggz.